welcome Kate Donaghy to our next episode of Salesforce Success. Kate is a senior woman in tech in the ecosystem. So would you like to introduce yourself, Kate?
Yeah, sure. So I'm, as you said, Kate Donaghy. I'm head of business technology at Secret Escapes. I've been there for 4.5 years, and I've worked actually in the Salesforce ecosystem probably for about 10 years now, sort of starting as an end user. But that's my bit about my background.
Awesome. Well, welcome this afternoon. And I know that we're going to drill down on your kind of career to date and ask you some sort of key questions. So spotlight on you, and I'll kick off with the first question. When did your interest in tech start?
Well, I think probably from very, very, very young age. I just always wanted to know how things worked. Just really fascinated by like the mechanics of things. And I grew up with two older brothers who every Christmas they get like Meccano, or there was like an electrical store near where I grew up that had like kits to have a circuit board and lights, and you'd be able to kind of build and solder this thing together. And my dad was an engineer as well. So I just think I just grew up with the mindset of curiosity and wanting to learn how things work. And yes, it's kind of always been something that I've kind of found interesting and kind of stayed with me. And I think that's just kind of then kind of been a kind of a thread that's been picked up throughout my career, and it's just kind of very kind of easily led me into the world of tech.
Okay, so how did you get your first step into tech?
I asked a lot of questions. So I didn't go to university. I actually was studying. Well, I got accepted into music college. I was a jazz singer when I was in secondary school, and yes, very different. But kind of did lots of maths and physics in school, and in engineering was kind of also something I was interested in. And then I kind of didn't really know what to do. I was like, oh, do I really want to go and study music? So I took a year out and kind of got a couple of jobs, and then I went back to university for like 3 months, just didn't love it, and got a temp role in PPL, which is the last company I worked for, as like a customer service agent, really. And I just think I was, again, this curiosity thread. Like I just asked lots of questions. I really wanted to know how things worked, both from a systems perspective, a process perspective. I really kind of was able to comprehend how things could work if we kind of put a bit of effort in. And I loved data analysis, like loved having a spreadsheet to figure it all out, and all the formulas. Like I just really liked using my brain in that way. And I think then kind of that kind of made me a sort of person that people would rely on. I became an SME, which is fairly typical, right, in the Salesforce world. SME into a business analyst. And I was just very fortunate at PPL that they kind of saw that part of me and kind of adapted my role and kind of gave me roles to step into to allow me to kind of really lean into that part of what I enjoyed about my job and what I was really good at.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing to have someone that's, so talented at the arts as well as someone that's very STEM focused, because sometimes you don't have both, do you?
Yeah, I'm quite an artsy person, actually. I used to be an Irish dancer, I was a national champion when I was about 16, and did stand-up comedy, radio presenting. And actually, I think there's this kind of change now, kind of STEM turning into STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths, and about actually having that ability to be artistic and a creative mind is what you need, right? In the world of tech, it's problem solving. So if you can be creative and different in the way you see those things, then yeah. And someone told me recently that they said music is like audible maths. It's all numbers, notes, everything. Like I just found that a really interesting concept to think about.
Yeah, that is amazing. Yeah, thought-provoking. And so tell me a little bit more about your career once you'd kind of entered tech.
Yeah. So as I said, I kind of went into this business analyst role, and I was kind of there for a couple of years. And then got headhunted into Secret Escapes as a product manager, Salesforce product manager, really focusing on the Salesforce platform that we were kind of using internally for sales and service. And very shortly after that, I then took on the Salesforce manager role, which kind of then was line managing the team and kind of owning the kind of strategy side of things. And then that kind of progressed. I've kind of added solution architect into my skill set. And then in 2021, I kind of stepped into this head of business technology role, and that was really kind of, I took on IT into that role and sort of generally kind of owning, for the most part, not everything, but for the most part, the kind of tools we use internally. And so that was, I think what I've found in terms of those steps is that it's kind of a non-traditional path. I didn't always have experience in the things I got given. I think people just saw potential. I am incredibly ambitious. I have like big plans for where I want to see my career, and I think people saw that kind of thirst for progression and desire to learn new things. And I think that's why people have taken risks on me and seen that in me. And I've also just said yes to lots of things, and had great managers, mentors, and kind of coaches in my life to kind of help me get there. But yes, it's just been, I think, saying yes and like looking for opportunities that I know are not necessarily predictable, but could be a really good fit, and kind of proposing that to people. So that's been a bit about my my journey into where I am at the moment.
Wow. And so what's been your kind of greatest challenge to date?
Yeah, I actually think there's two. I think one is like self-belief. People probably don't believe this about me, but I'm very lacking in self-belief. I really struggle with my confidence, like and having any consistency in my confidence. And I realized a few years ago that, like, I don't know if people have ever played Ultimate Street Fighter, but you kind of have this energy bar that you kind of depletes and you fill back up again. And I sort of learned that energy bar was very easy to deplete my energy bar, and the quickest way to get it kind of charged back up again was like feedback and compliments from people around me, but it was never sustainable. And so I realized that actually, if I can find that confidence in myself and identify what I'm good at and where I can improve, and have confidence that it's okay to fail, that my ability to kind of recharge my kind of confidence it was harder, but it was more kind of efficient, I guess. So that really trying to deal with that. And I still every 6 months have like a very emotional one-to-one with my manager where I go, I don't know what I'm doing. Can I do this? Am I good enough? And I think that's not helped by the fact that I do have a really non-traditional path into tech, and there is a lot of gatekeeping in tech. And, I want to be C-suite, I want to be CTO, I want to get to that point in my career. And so feeling like you haven't done the path everyone else has done, you're like, am I good enough? Can I do it? Will they know? Will they find me out? And so that self-belief and having confidence in that, and that being sustainable and consistent, has been a real challenge for me. And I think the second big challenge that I think we talked about on the roundtable and other bits and pieces, is this, honestly, is sexism. Like it's when I kind of got into more senior, particularly in kind of in my current role, where I'd kind of gone into this head of, I was kind of slightly more senior, in kind of in secret escapes, but also was working with a lot more vendors and kind of going to networking and conferences and bits and pieces. I've really seen kind of a new layer of sexism, which, like, I was really surprised when I kind of got to that point, being like, I really thought we were further ahead than where we are right now. Like, I was really surprised. I was like, oh, okay, we are nowhere near even understanding this. And I think it's harder because I think the sexism is really nuanced now. Whilst there is still obviously explicit sexism, I think it is slightly more, in my experience at least, I'm trying to go into it thinking no one is inherently sexist, and no one's choosing to marginalize me. They are just not used to having a woman in this position, in this conversation, who either is just not, there's no women there, or those women are typically office managers or PAs or a completely different role. And so it's really difficult to be really resilient through that and be like, okay, how do we move forward? Try to kind of accept what it is, but also try to make that change happen. And so trying to have conversations with individuals where I'm like, I know your behavior was not intentional, but like, this is how it made me feel, and just want you to be aware that this could be interpreted in these ways. And that's also really challenging because you kind of have to go into it somewhat subservient, just to kind of, if you want that change to happen, it has to feel like a partnership, and it's a bridge that we're building, rather than you've done something wrong and you're wrong and I'm right, because that doesn't move us forward. That does not help things. And so trying to turn that into a bit of an art form to try and have those conversations has been really hard. Something I've had to work a lot at, and kind of feel comfortable with feeling like a bit of a difficult woman. That's kind of where right at the beginning I was like, oh my God, am I the difficult woman? Is this what it is? So I found that really, really difficult to, as I say, stay resilient through it and kind of be okay with it and have to have those conversations. And try to make some change happen. So I think those are the two biggest ones. And that doesn't help, right? If you're having those difficult conversations, to have to be self-confident and believe in yourself on that journey as well. It's a difficult thing to kind of balance.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think there's a lot of females out there that have kind of imposter syndrome, and they need to see people like yourself that have succeeded as well. Somebody that's not done a traditional path as well, which is fantastic. And I think a lot of this comes down to changing cultures and educating, because no one would want to deeply offend you, but communication styles have to change, don't they, to embrace differences. So yeah, that
absolutely. And on that imposter syndrome point, actually, I read a really interesting book recently called Strong Female Lead. I'd really recommend it to any gender to read. And kind of the key takeaway I took from it was that, like, it's not necessarily about having more women in leadership roles, even though that would be the shortest path to value and the quickest way to do it and still really beneficial. It's about having leaders with qualities that are more inherently socialized into women, that kind of empathy, human first, connection, collaboration, this kind of human giver kind of element of being a woman. That actually, if we had more of those qualities, irrespective of the gender of that leader, it would really move us forward and really help things. But it also talked about how imposter syndrome is kind of vilified to an extent, and like, oh, you shouldn't have it. It's like, well, you should never feel so chronically lacking in confidence that you can't motivate yourself and move forward or achieve what you want to achieve. But imposter syndrome is kind of like a internal radar to check in of like, am I doing a good job? Could I be doing this better? It can get out of hand, and that's where it's unhelpful. But actually being kind of tuned into what you're doing and how what your impact is and how you're approaching things is really, really important. And we shouldn't try to eradicate that from us entirely because of the negative impacts of imposter syndrome as well. So that was really interesting, because I've really struggled with imposter syndrome. So kind of reframing it, I found that really interesting.
Okay. And I suppose off the back of that, what would be your top tip for career development?
Actually, I think probably somewhat aligned to that. I think it's like having a really deep knowledge of who you are. Like, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, know your areas for growth, know what drives you, know how you communicate with others. To your point there, like, how do you communicate? What are your values? What wakes you up in the morning? And like, try to be passionate about yourself. Like, if you want to progress, or even if you just want to kind of happily kind of plateau and enjoy your career and have that balance, like, I think being okay with who you are and being really kind of clear on what you offer the world and what you bring to the table, and kind of knowing all of that, not only do people see that self-awareness in you and kind of and kind of want to, I think, get drawn to you. Like, some people that know themselves, I find really fascinating. I want to kind of learn from them about how they know themselves. But also, I think if you're comfortable with who you are, it also allows you to kind of adopt this kind of vulnerable and authentic approach to your work, which is something that I really try to adopt, particularly over the last 18 months, is like, be really vulnerable with my team and like honest about where I am and what I'm turning up to the table with, because they then feel comfortable to do the same. You build really strong relationships and connections, and it's a really honest, trusting foundation of those kind of dynamics and the culture and the relationships and bits and pieces. So I think, knowing yourself and being comfortable to kind of be authentic and vulnerable about who you are and your leadership style, I think is really important.
Yeah, no, and that links in a lot with sort of soft skills, which are so important, aren't they, now, to career development and growth. So I suppose, Mason Frank, we've had some really key targets for levels of placements of females over 2023. We're doing lots of kind of women initiatives, community kind of events, client events, education pieces. But what could we be doing as a recruitment firm to kind of drive these women in tech initiatives forward, perhaps in 2024?
There's a couple of things I was thinking about. One is, I think, and I'm just going to be very clear, like, we haven't used a recruitment consultant for a little while, so I'm coming to this kind of point, I guess, the level of naivety or kind of ignorance, I guess is the right way of saying it. But there's, I think, one thing that I'm seeing is that it's often on the women to solve the problem. It would be great to have the men really taking the lead on some of this stuff. Like, I don't think anyone's intending to exclude themselves from the conversation, but kind of choosing to be passive, you are sort of choosing to be passive, right? That's an intentional thing. And so I think that trying to get more men involved in it and driving it forward, and them being at the women tech events, them leading those conversations, them kind of really kind of stepping in and being really great allies, I think is something that we need more from kind of the men. And I appreciate I'm talking in the kind of binaries of gender there, but yeah, kind of having some more men involved in the conversation. And then I think you talked a little bit about education there, but I think at least the successes we've seen at Secret Escapes in the last couple of years has been job descriptions, understanding the impact of them, like the psychology, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and how that plays into job description, and really real clarity around what it is you're looking for. And I think you guys keeping your partners accountable to be like, hey, you need to have this clarity that we can help you and we can be a really great partner to help fill these roles. But if you don't know exactly what you're looking for, that makes it difficult for you guys, I would imagine. And so I think, yeah, how they're structured. I think also a trend I see in job descriptions is, I think, this long list of what is the absolute necessary things you need to have. And it's like, there's no way you're going to find someone with all these 15 things. So you must be able to compromise on some of it. What is that? Be really diligent, be really kind of rigorous with yourself and question what you're writing. Is that really the right thing we're asking for? And also this kind of like must have 5 years experience or 7 years experience. I call that bluff a little bit. Like, what do you think 5 years experience means? Because that's what you're looking for. It's not necessarily the number, right? You want them to demonstrate they can do X, Y, and Z. So focus in on the demonstrable skills rather than an arbitrary number, which you assume means that. And when we did that, the amount of variety we saw in different ages applying for jobs, and also we saw more women who had just been on maternity leave or extended parental leave or had a break in their career because they were like, oh, okay, I know I can demonstrate that skill, just it wasn't 5 years of it because I've been having children or whatever the case may be. And so I think you guys educating and keeping them accountable and understanding that you can buy software as well that, you know, removes the gendered language from your job descriptions. But if the person writing it still doesn't understand that nuance and that kind of is not aware of that thinking, then I think you guys should be able to have that license to teach them and kind of educate them in that and help them learn that path. And I think definitely encouraging more junior roles, particularly in the Salesforce ecosystem. You know, I think we've only had apprenticeships in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 2 or 3 years, and having this more junior role, and like, it's really great that we have this great journey, I think, in the world of Salesforce of like being an SME in the business, business analyst, and kind of stepping into these roles and being an admin and stuff is great. It's really, really accessible, but also there are other ways to get people in. So yeah, as I said, apprenticeships, having those more readily available, having more junior roles, encouraging your teams to kind of, or your partners to kind of think about that and build that up and build those layers. Because if you're always searching for like, that pot is still very, very male dominated. And so you have to try and introduce kind of varied layers into the mix to really create that diversity. And there's so much evidence that kind of states that diverse leadership teams, just diverse teams as a whole, different worldviews, totally facilitates creativity. And the problems we're trying to solve these days in kind of tech, both for internal employees, for customers and their experiences, for salespeople, all of those different bits and pieces, you have to be creative because these are new problems we're having to solve now. It's constantly changing. So if you've just got a whole group of people that think the same way, you're really going to get behind the curve quite quickly.
Yeah, no, there's wonderful insights within that. I know that over the next few months, we're going to be doing quite a lot of work linked to allies, using our kind of platform to educate a little bit more, running roundtables actually for kind of allies and kind of hopefully, improving the data for 2024, which would be fantastic. And, trying to eradicate these non-biased behaviours. So, yeah, it's brilliant. Thank you very much for sparing the time this afternoon, Kate. All of this information has been very insightful, and we'll look forward to welcoming you back in the future.